Good afternoon. My name is Annie Davenport. I am the training lead here at AMS. I will be doing the town hall today for our modern events. As we go through today, I am going to be referencing this PowerPoint, which is uploaded on our training center as a PDF. That is the first link that I provided to you in the chat if you do want to have access to this PowerPoint. However, most of what I'm going to be looking at today is not going to be on this PowerPoint. We are going to be live in the tool doing a demo. And that's where the user guide, that is the second link provided in the chat to you, goes in depth into the different functionalities that we're going to be looking at with modern events. The third link that was provided to you is a highlight reel of the things that are coming with events. But as I mentioned earlier, we will be recording the town halls this week so that we can create a final town hall video recording that you will be able to access through our YouTube and training center sites. We will also, at closer to the release, be providing other videos on modern events. So if you prefer to follow a video for your training rather than using our user guide, you'll have those videos as access. So today we're going to be talking about our modern events. A few things have already happened for modern events to prepare for the release that we have scheduled for later this month. And then we're also going to be looking at what you're going to be seeing that is changing with this modern release event. So prior to this release that's happening at the end of the month, we did make some updates to the nomenclature in our tool. So you probably see already in the tool, things are being called events rather than milestones. And that is so that we made that change so that we can capture a wider range of activities that make up that procurement schedule. So not only are we going to track those milestone dates that you're looking to meet, but we're also going to be able to track your documents and those workflows through our events tab. The things that you're going to be changing with the modern events update at the end of the month is first our update to the events tab. Previously, you were accessing our legacy pages through the events tab on your PID homepage. Now with this modern events release, you're going to be able to access all of your event functionality right on that events tab. So that's going to include not only viewing your schedule, but also being able to make updates to your dates, entering that initial plan. You're also going to be able to add your events from this page, and not only your standard events, but any of those subordinates. You'll be able to reorder and shift your schedule all right from that homepage. The next thing that you're going to see at the end of this month is going to be the integration of our documents and workflows with the events tab. Currently in PMT, if you go to your documents tab and you create a workflow, you can workflow your document through that drafter, reviewer, and approver stages, but all of that workflow management is done within that workflow. You're not able to track your dates outside of that workflow. With the integration of workflows with events, you're going to be able to see all of your workflow dates for the different stages of that workflow right on the events tab. So now you're going to be able to see the dates tied to your workflows in comparison to any of those milestone type dates that you are also tracking in your event schedule. With workflows being integrated with your events, those workflow stages are going to automatically be added to your event schedule as subordinates to that event. And the dates are automatically going to populate as that workflow moves through all of those stages. So it takes away that manual process of checking what was done on the workflow and then going over to your events tab. It's now all going to be automated. The third thing that you're going to see this month is the updated standard event list. We currently have about 10 commands or syscoms that are using AMS. Of all of those syscoms that are in AMS, we had about 500 different milestones that were used across all of those different commands. Some people were using milestones that were representing the exact same thing, but they had slightly different names. So we standardized that. Everybody's going to be using the exact same name to represent the exact same event. We also had some of our commands were using milestones that were extremely granular, breaking down things into smaller steps, while other commands were using more of a high level event and then adding subordinates underneath it. We've standardized that across all of the commands. So again, everybody's going to be using the same breakdown of those events. And this is going to help if you're using our executing org functionality within PMT and you're sending those contract actions to different commands within the tool. Everybody's going to be looking at those same event schedules. This is also going to help with any of your metrics that you need to run. If everybody's on a standard list of events, when you're looking at those visualizations from the top level or the highest level that you have access to, everybody is standardized across the board. The last thing that you're going to see change is our modern event management. This was previously known as Manage Milestones Global, where our super users and org admins were able to get in. They could set those defaults for their command as well as reorder their milestones for each of those different PID classifications and acquisitions types. The functionality of this page is going to stay very similar to what you currently have experience with for Manage Milestones Global, but it's going to get a facelift and move to our new modern look and feel. Let's look at some of these changes and see what they're actually going to look like. So first, visually, here is an example of why we moved to this standard event list. Looking at the justification and approval, when we pulled all of the milestones across all of the commands for the justification and approval event, we found that there were 15 different milestones used across all of our commands that were all ultimately representing the justification and approval being completed, whether it was a granular step in that process or it was the overall process as a whole. Working with the PMT CCB or the stakeholders from each of those commands, we looked at all of those legacy milestones, determined what modern event they should all map to. So the justification and approval is now going to be the modern event that represents all 15 of those legacy milestones. The justification and approval is actually a document that is available on your workflow tab. So rather than having to add each of these different milestones to your event schedule as subordinates underneath the justification and approval, you can now have a top level justification and approval event, and all of the stages that are part of that workflow are going to roll up underneath it after you create that workflow. If you don't use the workflows, you can then create each of these subordinates underneath that top level justification and approval. This is going to allow you to then go to your visualizations and reports and see how long overall does it take me to get a J&A completed for my organization or my command as a whole. You'll still be able to, on some of our dashboards and reports that previously included subordinate milestones, you would also be able to review this down at the subordinate level if you wanted to see a different piece of that J&A completed and how long those were on average taking. Here is an example of how we are migrating your legacy milestones to your modern event list. So we made the decision with the recommendation from the CCB is to actually migrate the event, any of your legacy milestones, over to the modern event list. So if you were using, for example, multiple J&A milestones, you had J&A prepared, the legal review, and then that Navigator level approval, all three of those legacy milestones are now going to become subordinates underneath the top level justification and approval modern event. That's going to automatically happen for you. You don't have to do anything in the system. We're going to make that automatically happen when our modern events are released into production at the end of this month. This example is actually going to make a lot more sense once we get in and do a demo within the system, but this is showing that integration between our workflows and events. If you create a workflow from your document tab, not only is it going to create that workflow homepage where you're able to manage your workflow, all of the stages on that workflow, your files, any comments for that workflow, but it's also going to populate that event on your new event tab, where you're then going to be able to view that workflow progress in comparison to your entire event schedule. I do want to also point out as we're going through this, while we did standardize the events, many of you were already using the standard events for your gate milestones. So all of your gate and mandatory milestones across all of your PID classifications are going to stay the same. The only area where we did make some changes is for your CIMAC PID classification. We did break it down by your competitive and sole source and set those defaults for those PID classifications slightly different than what you currently have in production. So that is something just to be aware of for PIDs going forward. If you do have those CIMAC competitive versus sole source, you may have some additional gate milestones or gate events that you didn't previously have. Otherwise, all of your gate events are staying the same. Your cycle times are going to stay the same. So you will be able to still see all of your rolled up cycle time data for all of your PID classifications when you go to your reports and visualizations. And we're going to look at reports and visualizations a little bit later on, and I'll show you where you might see some changes. But for the overall aspect of those, they really aren't going to change functionality wise. Before we get live into the tool and I actually show you guys our events tab, I do want to show you just a static view of our events tab that is going to be modernized. Looking at this view, you can see at the very top of this events tab, you have an ability to search for your different events. This is going to allow you to type in a partial or complete name of your event. You're going to have a drop down where you can change the view that you're looking at, and we'll actually go in when we are demoing live and change those views so you can see them. Next, we have our add event button. This is how you will add events to your schedule. And then lastly is our save button at the very top of the page. We're going to go in depth into all of that functionality when we get into the tool and we're live demoing. But I just wanted to point out some of those icons that you're going to be seeing and our status indicators that you'll have. On this page, you will also see all of your phases broken down along with your events. Next to your events, if you see an icon, it's going to represent one of three things. The first icon is this tree type icon. This is indicating that that event has subordinate events underneath it. The icon right next to it that shows a piece of paper with a chain link on it is going to be indicating that this event is linked to a document that has an active workflow. And then we have our gate indicator. So it looks like a fence gate, and that is representing our gate events. Those are those gate events that are representing the start and end of each of your phases, which is where we're tracking those cycle times too. On your phases as well as your events, we will now have status indicators on those. So the first status indicator you may see is the draft indicator. This draft indicator is when a new event has been added to the schedule and the schedule has not been saved. So you still have the ability to remove that event before saving it. Once you save it, it would then remove that draft status on that. Your pending status indicates that a change has been made to an event, which has ultimately also impacted your phase. And that change is pending until, again, you save your event schedule. Next indicator you're going to see is our not started. Not started just means that that event is still scheduled for in the future. You don't have an actual start date. And then this is also going to impact your phase status. If none of the events have started within the phase, you'll also see that not started icon there. In progress is going to represent if an event has an actual start date, but not an actual end date. And then same thing for your phase. If your phase has started, events have started in that progress or in that phase, the phase will represent as in progress until all of those events have been completed within the phase. Due soon, this indicator is also available in your documents and workload management pages. Due soon is representing that that event is planned to complete within 20% of the set planned duration. So if I had scheduled my event for 10 days to complete and I am 2 days from that completion date, I'm going to get a due soon indicator letting me know that this event, it's not past due yet, but I do need to look at it and make sure that we are going to stay on track to complete that event on time. If I do miss my planned or revised end date for an event or then that phase, I'll get a past due red indicator there. And then when my event has an actual start and end date, as well as my phase has an actual start and end date, I will get that complete icon status for me. So when I demo live, there's a couple things that I'm going to be displaying for you. First, we're going to do an overview of that tab, more interactive than just that static view that you guys were looking at. We're also going to look at generating an initial schedule in that planning, or you would also be able to do this in the PFA status. So we'll look at adding events to our schedule. And then lastly, we're going to look at an active PID where we're going to manage those events. And I'll show you how that manage events is going to look slightly different than what you are currently used to in our legacy milestones. This environment that I am demoing to you guys today, this is our training environment. It is similar to a sandbox environment that you could get in if you are interested in looking at this prior to the release. I did provide the link as the last link on the chat. I do recommend if you watch through today, let me click through showing you how to do this. And then after the training, if you want to get in, you're welcome to go ahead and try to get in and look at this as well. I'll also go through and remind you guys how to do that and what you'll be seeing when you go into that training environment a little bit later on. But I do recommend hold off on trying to click through and following as I'm clicking through today, and wait until the end, and I'll show you guys some tips and tricks on how to do that. All right, so I am in AMS and I am going to go to my planning PID. This PID is currently in a planning status, but it would also work the same if I was in a PFA status. And I'm going to jump to my events tab from my PID homepage. You'll notice my events tab loads right here on this page. I'm no longer getting that white page with the blue buttons that I navigate away from my PID homepage, and I have to go to my legacy page, and then I've got to save and come back to my my modern PID homepage. Now I'm doing everything right in PID home. So this is really going to speed up your process where you're going to be able to jump back and forth between all of your different tabs. If you need to check something on a different tab, you can do all of that from this view. So from my events tab, the first thing that you'll see at the top left of this page is your search field. This search field is going to allow you to search on any of those event names. This is a great way if you are wondering, does this event exist on my schedule without having to scroll through and search for it. This is also if you are looking to enter in dates, you have a specific event that you want to jump to enter those dates, you can start to type into that field and it will filter down your event schedule to just those events that have that partial, or if you have the complete name of the event right there in it. And then select my X to clear that out. The next thing I've got at the top of my events tab is my view menu. So the first option on that is my view or edit. This is the default view and the view that we recommend that you spend most of your time in. This is where you're going to be able to view all of your events. And this is also where you will be able to edit those dates. So if you expand any of those events using the triangle on the right-hand side, you'll be able to enter in the appropriate dates depending on what status you're in. In this situation, I am in a planning status, so I can enter my planned dates. When I move to an active status, those planned dates are going to be locked and my revised and actual dates are going to open up and I will be able to enter those dates. You'll also notice when I expand one of those event names, I get my question mark, which gives me my help text over on the right-hand side. This is our standard help text for each of those events. And then you'll have your start and end date, the responsible activities, what acquisition types this event is available for. And then lastly, the duration of whether this is typically scheduled as a one-day or multi-day event. From this view, you have the ability to add subordinates. We're going to add subordinates a little bit later, so I'm not going to do that in this moment. You also have the option to add a comment. When you add that comment to your event, not only does it display underneath that event, but you'll also see it displayed on the Notes tab. Any of the reports or visualizations that pull in milestone comments will also pull in these comments into those reports or visualizations. Something that is updated with our comments on our events is the ability to edit those comments by the person who created the comment. So as the creator of this comment, I can go in here and edit it and save those changes. And it's going to go ahead and update my date and timestamp on my event. I can close those comments. And then I also have that open comments button where I could view those comments as well. Okay, so we talked about view edit. We talked about looking at the breakdown of what you see on that event. Let's actually move to our reorder view. So from my drop down, I have the option to switch my view to reorder. When I switch to reorder, I will get 3 lines next to any of my events that are not completed, or if they are not those gate events. And I can choose to then drag and drop those events right here within my event table. So no longer in how Legacy has a pop-up modal and you're hitting arrows to try to move those events. A much smoother process to reorder your events with this new modern functionality. The next view that you have is our shift schedule view. Shift schedule is going to allow you to select any events that do not have actual dates, and you can choose to shift the schedule on those events a set number of days. When you go to shift schedule, currently that is limited to our admins only, but when Modern Events is released, it will be opened up to our editors on the PIDs as well. So admins and editors will have the ability to shift schedule. And we'll do an example of shifting the schedule once we're in an active PID so you can see how it revises all of those dates. The only other option that wasn't visible in this view right now was our delete option. The delete option is not there because I don't have any events that I'm able to delete. All of the events on here are either gate events or they are mandatory for this PID to be able to be completed. So we looked at our views. Next is our add event button. We will add We're going to go ahead and add an event. There's a couple different ways that we can add events in our system. So the first way with modern events that you would be able to add events is that you would add an event that is purely a date event. So this event is not going to be tied to a document in any way. It will just be a date. So the example I'm going to use to our procurement strategy meeting. This is not tied to a document. There's not a document on the documents tab that becomes a workflow that ties to here. So I'm going to go ahead and add that event. When I selected the add event button, it brought up my add events modal, where I could then type in the name of the event that I want to add. It searches all of my phases for me, and then I can select my add event button. This is where I'm now seeing that draft status indicator telling me that I've added a new event to my schedule. Before I save this, I do have the option to remove it if I choose not to keep that event. But if I do want to keep my procurement strategy meeting event, I'll want to hit the save button up in the top right-hand corner. The save functionality on our events tab is slightly different than the save functionality on any of our other tabs, except for the documents tab. Both the events and documents tab do not auto save. They will save before you get logged out, but that is only if the system logs you out for inactivity. Otherwise, if you navigate to other pages within this tab or within this PID homepage, you are not going to auto save when you leave that tab. That's why we put that yellow indicator at the top, letting you know that you have unsaved changes. And then we've also added the yellow indicator to your events tab, and it'll also display on the documents tab. So I can start navigating to other tabs within my PID homepage. It allows me to navigate away from my events tab. So if I need to check anything, maybe under my details tab prior to adding an event, I can go ahead and do that and then return back to my events tab and save. If I attempt to leave my PID, for example, going to my search page, I am going to get an unsaved changes warning. This is going to let me know what tab my unsaved changes are on. In this case, it's my events tab, but it could also display for my documents tab. I can choose to go back, which would return me right back to that events tab. I can choose to discard those changes and then go to PID search anyways. So anything I hadn't saved yet would automatically be discarded, and then I would go to my search page. I can also choose to save. If I select save, it's going to save those changes that have been made and then also let me continue on to my search page. I want to go back because I want to continue working through our events tab. So I'm going to select go back, and it leaves me right here on my events tab. I'm going to go ahead and save that event. By saving that event, I no longer have my draft status on here, and it's showing as not started because there are no dates on there, and doesn't have any of the actual start or end dates in there. The next type of event that we can add are the subordinates that are tied to a date event. So any of my events that do not tie to a workflow, I have the ability to manually add subordinates to. So for my procurement strategy meeting, if I want to add subordinates to this, I can expand that event, select the add subordinates button, and this is going to give me a new line where I can add that custom subordinate name. I'm just going to call that subordinate 1. And we'll add a second one called subordinate 2. Not like I accidentally hit a different button on my keyboard. All right. Now that I've added my subordinates, I'm going to go ahead and enter their planned dates. Let's go with started yesterday. Give this one 2 days to complete. This one will start today. And we'll give it 3 days to complete. Right, and then I will go ahead and save. Now that I added those subordinates to my procurement strategy meeting, I am now going to have that tree icon next to my procurement strategy meeting, which is going to be my quick glance letting me know that I have those subordinates underneath that main standard event. The next type of event that I can add is an event that is tied to a document. So we're going to actually go both directions. We're going to add an event from the events tab that could be a document that could get workflowed. And then I'm going to show you adding a workflow from the documents tab and how it's automatically going to populate that workflow on my events tab. So I'm going to add an event by selecting my add event button. I've got all of my different phases where I can expand each of those if I wanted to search to find the name of the document that I want to add. But I also have the ability to use that search to find the specific event that I would like to add that also happens to be a document, and I'll show you that indicator in just a moment so that we know that it is a document. So I'm going to select market research as my document that I would like to add and hit add events. I've now added that market research event to my event schedule. And when I go to my documents tab, market research is going to be pre-selected on my documents tab as part of the PID package. This is then going to give me the indicator at the top of that section for those documents. There is a document that has not been started, meaning that it's part of the PID package. It's been selected as part of the PID package, and I haven't done a workflow on it. I can then choose, because I added this from the events tab, I can choose if I don't want this to be part of the PID package and remove it. That would then make it that it's by default just required. I could also say, I don't want this market research. I don't want to do a workflow for this at all. I want this to just be an event, in which case I would deselect both of these. If I do want it to be a workflow that is tied to that event, then I would create the workflow from this page, and all of those dates are going to automatically be generated on my event schedule. Going back to my events tab, I still have that market research, which has been added. And because I haven't kicked off a workflow on that, I don't have that workflow indicator here. But if I add that workflow, I would get that workflow indicator. All right. I'm going to refresh what I've done so far, just make sure we're all on the same page. And then we will continue to the next big one where we're going to tie a workflow to an event. So the first thing that I showed you guys how to do is adding a event through my add events button that is not tied to a document. So in this instance, I used the procurement strategy meeting. I selected add events and then typed into search for my procurement strategy meeting. I then chose to add subordinate events underneath that procurement strategy meeting. By adding those subordinates and entering the dates into them, that populated the planned dates for that procurement strategy meeting, as well as give that tree indicator next to that milestone or event telling me that there are subordinates underneath that event. The next type of event that I added was an event that could be a workflow, and that was our market research. So I added the market research event by hitting the add events and went ahead and added that market research event. By adding market research, which is a document that is available under our documents tab. Now, when I go to my documents tab, I'll see a not started indicator on my supporting documentation. And when I scroll through, I can see that market research has been pre-selected as part of the PID package and required. That's my indicator that this was assigned as an event to be completed. So therefore, it's recommendation that I use the documents and workflow. Just because it is selected as part of the PID package or required does not mean it has to happen for the PID to move to an active or an awarded status. These check marks are indicating where you're going to start seeing these status indicators, but making this required does not force that workflow to be completed in order for that event or the PID to move through and become active or awarded. Now, if I added something like market research and I have the document, it doesn't necessarily need to go through an entire workflow. I do have the ability, if I hit create workflow, to just go ahead and upload that market research document. So I'm going to do that and show you guys what it's going to then look like on my events tab. So I've got my final market research document. I'm not going to hit next because I don't want to set up an entire workflow for this document. I just want this document uploaded and stored on my documents tab and then be able to see that it was uploaded from my events page. So I'm going to select no review required. I can add a comment if I want to, and then I'm going to complete that workflow. By completing that workflow, I've got a blue link on market research, which would then open up that market research workflow homepage where I could view my document. But I also will notice on my events tab, my market research event now indicates that it is tied to a workflow because I created that workflow. Because I uploaded a document and that was all I did, I didn't send it through an entire process of draft, review, approval. I just added that document. That document is going to get a complete on the event status, and it gives me the actual date that I uploaded that document. I can expand to see that even though it was tied to a workflow, all it had was one stage with that approver originator that uploaded that document. If I want to see that document, not only could I have seen the document from the Documents tab, but from the Events tab, the Market Research event name has now become a link to my workflow homepage, where it's going to bring me to that Market Research workflow homepage. When it loads, I'll be able to see the total cycle time for it. In this instance, I just went ahead and uploaded that document, so it was 1 day to upload it. I can see the stages, which was the one stage of adding that document. And then I can see the final document right here. So I no longer need to go to the Documents tab or go to the collaboration site to get to those documents. I'm going to see them and have that quick access to them right from my Events tab by selecting the event name. And I'm going to go ahead and return back to my PID and go back to my Events tab. The last thing that we are going to do in a planning status is we're going to add a new workflow that is not currently being captured on our events tab. That workflow that we're going to do is our justification and approval. You can see on my events list, I don't currently have that justification and approval, but I'm going to kick off that workflow from our documents tab. I'm going to walk you guys through setting up that workflow and give a brief overview of how to set that workflow up. So if you're not already familiar with it, you can see that. But if you are already familiar with how to create a workflow, we're not going to go super in depth today. Well, let's create a workflow. This is the part that we're really excited about. So the example that we keep returning back to is that justification and approval. That was one of those one of those events that we had a bunch of milestones available for. Some people were using workflows for it. Some people were having multiple milestones. Some people had milestones with a bunch of subordinates. And so now we're hoping to standardize that process where you have the justification and approval event, and then you can go in and you can create the workflow right from the Documents tab, and then everything is going to be auto-populated on our event schedule. So from my Documents tab, anywhere that I see a document name that has a calendar icon next to it, that is letting me know that that document could be linked to an event. If I haven't created the workflow, then I'm not going to see that event on my event schedule. But if I do create a workflow, which we're about to do, you're going to see that workflow event populate on my event schedule with all of those dates automatically populated on there. So I'm going to go ahead and create my J&A workflow by hitting that create workflow button. From here, the first thing I need to do or recommended to do is upload a file. So I'm going to select there to upload the file. Now we did upload workflows, so you don't have to upload a file in order to kick off the workflow. However, you will have to upload a file to move it to a reviewer stage. So the drafters could start with no pre-file there and just upload the first initial file. But to get past those drafters, you're going to have a file on there so that there's something that could be reviewed and then ultimately approved. So I've added my document. I'm going to hit next, and this is where I'm going to create my workflow. First thing that I'm required to do is set my planned start and end dates for my workflow. I can plan to start my workflow in the future. So if I wanted to start it maybe next week, and I'm just going to click 2 weeks, but I could schedule it however I want. It's going to default set those as my start and end dates. Now, as I create my stages of this workflow, if I go beyond my 15 days, it will update those dates, but it's going to give me a warning indicator that I've gone past my initial plan, and then maybe do I want to readjust my schedule so I stay within those initial 15 days, or am I okay going past the initial 15 days? For this example, because I want to show you guys actually completing this workflow, I'm going to go ahead and start with it on today as my start date, so that you'll see the workflow actually kick off on the events tab. My default stages for a workflow is to start with your drafter stage. The intent of the drafter stage is this is where our drafters are going to work together. They'll collaborate in creating the document that is part of this workflow. They'll have the ability to check a document in and out, upload new versions of that document, add comments and notes for each other. All of those minor versions of the document that the drafters are working with are going to be stored on here. So if somebody is out and they need to see the previous version, they'll be able to see all of that through that workflow. Our drafters are then going to send it on to the reviewer. Our reviewers are reviewing that document, making sure that it is ready to go for those approval signatures. The reviewers are still going to have access to all of those minor versions of the document, and they'll also have the ability to reject the document and return it back to our drafters. When they return it back to the drafters then have the ability to make edits to it and send back on to the reviewers. Once it passes the reviewers, there's our approver originator stage. This is the person who creates the workflow, is considered our approver originator. We think of them as our managers on the workflow. They're the ones who that document goes to first before it gets sent on for your approval signatures. This is so that they can make sure the correct document is actually uploaded on there. And when it gets sent to our approver, that's when the document becomes a major version of the document. That major version of the document is what would then get sent on to our approvers. So they're not going to see all of the back and forth minor versions, but they would see the major version. If the approvers reject that major version and it gets sent back and the reviewers and drafters do another version of it, the approvers would still be able to see those historical major versions of the document. I have my workflow stages. I'm going to go ahead and hit next. From here, this is where I set up each of my stages. The functionality of setting up those stages is not changing with modern events. This is where I can choose whether I want that stage to be parallel or serial, how many days I want to give people to do it, and then I can search to figure out who I want to add to my stages. So I'm going to add 2 people in a parallel stage. For my drafters, Charlotte and Elaine have 7 days to complete this combined. Next, I've got my reviewer. I'm going to give them 3 days, and we're going to just put one person on as my reviewer. Next is that approver originator. So that approver originator is getting that first view of the major version of the document before it goes on to our approvers for signature. I'm going to leave it as just me in this instance. I'm not able to remove me, but I can add additional people as my approver originators. And then lastly, I've got my approvers. I'm going to leave my approvers in a serial. I am going to say that all of them have to do it. But if this was parallel, I would have the option to say either all of them have to approve this or any of them. Right, so then we've got each of our approvers. I can have that one approval stage and have everybody approve one right after another. From my original spot, I could have created more approval stages if I wanted to create different groups of people doing those approvals. You'll notice as I added all of my people, my total number of days to complete my workflow has increased. I'm now 3 days over my planned schedule. This is where I'd have the option to go back. I can revise my days if I want to still stay within my original planned dates. If I'm not worried about going past that schedule, I want to give everybody the dates that they have. I'm just going to go ahead and hit next, and I will launch my workflow to override my original schedule. So from here, I can see all of my stages listed out for my workflow, how many days each of those stages have, and the ultimate start and end dates for this workflow. I'm going to go ahead and launch this workflow. If I had scheduled it to start in the future, it would say schedule workflow. And then on my events tab, once this loads, we will see our justification and approval workflow and all of the stages mapped out. Finish. All right, so on my documents tab, my J&A workflow, I no longer have that create button. I'm onto my manage button. And if I go to my events tab, my J&A has now automatically populated. I didn't add that as a new event from my events tab. It automatically populated because I created that workflow. I've got my tree indicator letting me know that there are subordinates underneath this J&A event. And then that paper with the chain link is letting me know that this is linked to an event. My J&A is in progress because I went ahead and launched it right away. So I do have an actual start date because that's the day that I launched this, which is today. If I had scheduled this to start in the future, it would show as not started. And then I have my planned end date and that duration. When I expand this view, I can see all of those stages mapped out with the start and end dates based on those durations that were scheduled for that workflow. You'll notice that from here, I do not have the ability to edit the dates that are part of a workflow. If you need to edit dates that are part of a workflow, you would actually need to go into the workflow to update those dates. And that's because those days and durations are tied to individual people. So if I have multiple drafters on this, I can't just change the dates here. I need to go into that workflow and actually update the dates based on the durations for those individual people. If I need to quickly get into my workflow to do some management on that, I don't have to go to my documents tab. I can go right to that J&A workflow by selecting that J&A link. And now I'm on that workflow homepage when it finishes loading for my justification and approval. And now I can see under my stages how those stages were actually broken down. So I had 2 people in the drafter stage. They've got those 7 days to complete it. they're in progress. I can see all of my future stages for that workflow. This is where I could do any of those edits that need to happen for that workflow. If I need to move people around, change durations for how long they have to complete something, remove those people from it, all of that is possible right from my workflow management page. And when I return back to my PID and go to my event schedule, all of those date changes would be captured that I made from my workflow management page. Now that we've added a few events on here, I do want to show you how you have the ability to delete. So because I've added events that don't have to, aren't required as part of that schedule, I do now have that delete option. By selecting delete, an X will display next to any of those events that I do have the ability to delete. Reminder, you can't delete any gate or mandatory events, and then you're not going to be able to delete any of the events that are tied to workflows. If it is tied to a workflow, you would do that deletion from the workflow page, or you would cancel that workflow. The next thing we're going to do is actually move to an active PID, and we're going to manage our schedule. So we'll look at revising dates, shifting our schedule, and then completing some of the stages on an active workflow. I am going to go to a active PID. So this is an active PID. It has the same events set up on it as we previously did on that planning PID. But now you'll notice I'm now in that active status. So when I expand any of my events, I'm not able to enter plan dates. Those are all locked on me. And I'm only able to update my revised schedule or put in my actual dates. To put in your actual dates, you're going to put in your actual start date and then give your actual end date. And then so on. So I would go through, enter my actual start date, enter my duration, and then I'm able to enter in that actual end date. If I enter dates that I didn't actually mean and I want to remove them, I get that blue icon with the X in it, and I can select that to remove those dates, and it'll return me back to those planned dates. Because I have been making changes, I'm going to get my yellow save indicator on here where I would want to save this so that my changes are saved. Again, that reminder of Events tab and Documents tab are not going to auto save for you unless you are about to be logged out. When the system gives you the warning that you have been logged out, it is going to auto save anything that you had on there. We looked at our market research workflow on our last planning PID where we went ahead and added that document. By adding that document as a final document, it automatically completed that workflow, which gave me my actual end dates. I'm going to actually go back and enter in revised dates on my procurement strategy meeting so you guys can see how adding those revised dates are going to change or force me to enter my revision reasons. Right, so now that I've got those revised dates entered, when I go ahead and save this, it's going to force me to enter my revision reason. There's a top level category that I would select from my drop down. Currently, those categories are personnel shortage, funding issues, workload capacity issues, and changes to contracting strategy. Our CCB, so your command stakeholders, are submitting additional topics that or categories that they would like to be seen in the reason for revision. So once we get those from the CCB members, those will be added. But at this time, those are the approved revision reason topics. And then I can use additional the comments to add additional details and then add that comment. Right, that comment is then going to display underneath my comments section. Next thing we're going to look at, we talked about it briefly while we were on a planning pid, but is our shift schedule option. So shift schedule is available to our admins and editors now. Previously was only available to our admins, but shift schedule is going to allow you to shift a large group of events all the same number of days. So in this example, it pre-selects any of my events that don't have those actual dates. I'm going to actually go ahead and unselect that, and I'm going to just select those events later on after my procurement package development phase. And I'm going to say all of those events need to be shifted, we'll say 2 weeks to shift them. I'm going to calculate those dates. It's going to give me those new revised dates for each of those events. I can choose to remove them with that blue X if I don't want to have those revised dates for each of those individual ones. If I navigate away from this page, it would give me the option to discard those changes if I didn't want to, but I'm going to go ahead and save them. And when I save it, it's asking me, why did I revise those dates? I shifted the schedule for multiple events. I'm going to provide my reason for why we are revising all of those events and hit that add comments. All of my events are now going to get the same comment for revised comments or for revision reason on them that were captured as part of that shift schedule. As the creator of that comment, because I revised it, it's going to give me the option where I can edit that and I can change my revision reason if I need to. Next thing that we're going to do, we looked at revising dates. Same way that we revise dates is how our ability to enter those actual dates, unless we are on a workflow. So our justification and approval workflow, this is a similar workflow to the one that we set up on that planning PID. I'm not able to enter those revised or actual dates from that workflow or from the events tab. I need to actually go into my workflow, and my actual dates are automatically going to populate as the stages of each of those the stages of the workflow are completed. So let's go to my justification and approval. As a admin, I have the ability to complete tasking on behalf of people. So I can see where it says Charlotte and Elaine's name. I can complete tasking for them. If I was an editor going in and I was somebody else mapped onto this workflow that didn't have admin privileges, I would not see the ability to complete tasking until it was my turn to complete that tasking. So for example, if Charlotte went in here, she would only see the complete button next to her name, not next to Elaine's. I'm an admin, so I have that complete button for both of them, so I can complete tasking for either one of them. If I was Charlotte or Elaine and I was going into my workflow, I would be able to view those files just the same as we could prior to modern events. If there were any comments that needed to be added to this workflow, they could be done on under our comments tab. And then our signatures are all stored for my approval stages. I'm going to go ahead and complete on behalf of Charlotte, as well as complete on behalf of Elaine once this loads, so that you guys can see what a completed stage looks like on our event schedule. Right. So by completing that tasking for Charlotte and Elaine, my drafter stage no longer took 7 days to complete. It actually only took 1 day to complete. And now the task has been sent over to Scott. So his start date is now today, and he has 3 days from today to complete that task. I'm going to return to my PID and go to my event schedule, where you guys are going to be able to see that J&A workflow and the events subordinates completed underneath it. So here's my justification and approval. My drafter stage was planned to start today and end on the 16th. It actually started and ended today. Because it started and ended today, it revised the schedule for everybody else, all of those other stages underneath that workflow. And now we are in that reviewer stage, and it's going to kick off that reviewer stage. My reviewer would now see that they have a task to complete under their workload management. They'd get that email notifying them that they have a task to complete, and they would be able to go in here and complete their task. If they complete their task and they just hit that complete button on the workflow, it's automatically going to complete the task in the workflow as well as enter the dates on our event schedule. So no longer somebody needing to then manually go in and say, yes, our JNA was reviewed and it was reviewed on this day, and then it was approved and it was approved on this day. It's automatically going to happen as those complete buttons are selected on our workflow. One more thing to show you guys in an active PID is our new phase that is available on our event schedule, and that is our post-award phase. Previously, our phases ended at contract award. That was the last milestone that you could add into your schedule. Contract award is still the final event in the contract award phase. However, we found a need that people were needing more events after that contract award date had occurred. And so we have added a post-award phase. I am able to add post-award events while I am in PFA planning active or an awarded status. I'm not required to have those plan dates in order to go active the way that our other events work. I'm also not required to have actual dates in order to go to an awarded status if it's in that post-award phase. That logic has been removed for those events. So let's give an example of, I want to add protests to be available for this event or this PID after award. Same thing with synopsis of contract. I'm going to go ahead and add those events. Because I added those events to the post-award section, I am not going to be forced to enter those planned dates prior to or for this to be in that active status. So I can go ahead and save, and I'll still have the ability to add those planned and revised dates, and then ultimately the actual dates afterwards. So my post-award has been added, and I've got the ability to enter in my planned dates. Once those planned dates have been updated, I will then be able to enter in revised or actual dates. So one of the biggest concerns that we've gotten from people when we've talked about the things are changing, is how it's going to impact your reports and visualizations. So both reports and visualizations have been updated in order to accept these new modern events. The functionality of both of them is not going to change. So when you open up your PID execution summary, it's still going to look the same. It's just going to be tracking off of those modern events. When you open up your CSP report, the report is still going to function the same. You're not going to see changes in the functionality of those reports. You're just going to be seeing those new updated event names. If you have a report or a visualization that you specifically call out a milestone through one of your saved filters, you may need to resave those filters. So a couple examples where we're anticipating we have quite a few saved filters on would be ad hoc reports. So if you have an ad hoc report that specifically calls out certain event names, you may need to resave that after this release. The event tracking dashboard has an option where you can save filters by specific event names, and then same thing with the personnel workload. So if any of those three areas, you guys have a saved filter that specifically calls out a milestone, you may need to resave those filters after the release. The other thing that you may see are slight changes in where those legacy milestones are going to roll up into our modern events. So my example on the left-hand side, this is what your event dates event dates report and your CSP report. When you're looking at all of your milestones, this is what it would look like. You have your parent milestone is all the way left aligned, and then if you had any subordinates, they're tabbed in. The example that we've talked about a few times is this J&A. So on this PID, they have J&A prepared and then J&A approved. That is going to automatically migrate over in, this is an example of the modern events, what the report would look like. You'll see that top level J&A event with the overall event cycle time. And then you're going to see those two subordinate events underneath that were the previous legacy milestones that are now making up that top level. So we can see the overall cycle time for that J&A as well as those individual subordinate milestones that make it up. If you have a milestone that currently has subordinates underneath it in the system today, you're not going to lose those subordinates. So my RFP release has migrated over to that solicitation RFP RFQ release, and the draft RFP, final RFP that were previously being tracked by this group on their PID are going to automatically migrate over as those subordinates on that event. So that's an example of what a report where you might see some of those changes. You don't lose any subordinates. You may gain some subordinates with that migration. So what's next? Where are we at now? And then what's coming up over the next couple of weeks? Right now, we are in our event town halls. Those town halls kicked off yesterday. So you guys are seeing the second town hall that we've offered. We are going to continue to offer town halls for up to a week after the release. As I mentioned earlier, we are recording these town halls. So you will have the ability to see a recorded version of it. We're going to combine all the good parts across a few days worth of town halls and create one solid recording of those. And those will be available through our training center as well as YouTube prior to the release. And then they'll stay and live there well after the release until something else comes out and they become obsolete. Our pre-release material is currently available on Training Center. I posted those links at the beginning of this conversation or the meeting, but I will have one of my trainers recopy those down to you guys so you have them available to you. Anywhere that we have pre-release material, you'll see red banners across them, so you know that there is a potential that that material would get updated. So we always recommend that you use the link to access it so that you're accessing the latest version rather than downloading it. I know things are constantly changing on us. Our developers are making updates based on the feedback that we're receiving. So you'll always want to have that pre-release saved as a link and not as the actual document. Starting the week of the release, we will start offering some hands-on workshops. So I know you guys are eager to get in there and maybe you want a scenario to walk you through clicking on this yourself. So starting the week of the release, we will start offering those hands-on workshops, and we may even start offering them a little sooner if we can get enough trainers available to do that. And we will continue to offer those for general. Anybody can sign up to 2 weeks after the release. If we see a need that we need to offer them longer, we will absolutely offer them longer. We will also, at the time of the release, the new user trainings and any of our admin trainings, those will also have the hands-on scenario pieces updated with our modern event stuff. All of our material links will be updated to our final release material the week of the release. So they'll remove that pre-release banner on there, and you'll know that that is the final information. Because we know we are going to get requests from people to do custom trainings coming in and working with your teams to review your current process and business rules and looking at how we might want to make some changes to those. We are planning to schedule custom training starting 2 weeks after the release. So don't hesitate to reach out. If we have availability to do it, we'll absolutely try to do it sooner. But we're not going to guarantee any of that custom training until 2 weeks after the release. Again, you're going to have tons of materials available to you. You'll be able to start clicking around and exploring, but the team is going to hold off on doing those custom trainings until we die down after the release, and then we'll start offering those where we can meet with you guys one-on-one, go over your current process, and see if there's any tweaks that you guys might want to make so that you can really take advantage of everything that we have available to you.